Hello, all, and welcome to our service, The Longest Night, a service of remembrance and grief. I wanted to bring you greetings on behalf of WakeMed Hospital, and in particular, our leadership and departments here, on behalf of our CEO and President, Donald Ginsig, on behalf of our Senior Vice President, Valerie Barlow. Thank you for your presence here. Thank you who might be watching and experiencing this online. I also wanted to highlight a little about this service. Today we are celebrating, recognizing, remembering our grief on the longest night of the year, the winter solstice. And this is different than what we've done in the past. We recognize that for many people, this time of year can be hard to celebrate holidays when you are missing your loved ones and grieving. And so we decided to move our remembrance service to this day of the year, the longest night of the year, where the sun comes a little earlier, the light lingers a little longer, in honor and recognition of what might be a long night for you. And so we thank you. We hope this service is comforting, is helpful for you. Before I take my seat, I also want to thank all who made this happen. A special thank you to our bereavement program coordinator, molwilliams, who many of you might know in our grief groups and bereavement programming. So thank you to Molly, thank you to Dan, who is shooting this, and all the people who will participate on the program today. We're grateful you're here. Thank you again, and welcome.
As we gather in body and spirit today, as the days grow shorter and the nights longer, know that here you do not need to sing a glad song or find a silver lining or convince yourself to put on a happy face. We are here not to practice letting go, but to practice letting in. Letting in the memories, both joyful and painful, that may emerge this time of year. Letting in the emotions that feel too difficult to name when someone asks for the 100th time, "How are you?" Letting in gentleness for ourselves when we pick up the phone to call them or get in the car but can't seem to remember where we're going. Letting in permission to do what feels right for us in this season, even when it's different from what others expect. Letting in the weight of knowing that this grief may be a part of our lives forever. Letting in the gratitude for the ways this person and their love for us continue to shape who we are and how we live. May this service be a time to welcome whatever your grieving spirit might need.
I invite us now into a moment to remember our WakeMed staff who have died in this last year. The grief that comes from losing our colleagues and our friends is deep and painful. In this grief, we pause to honor and uplift their lives. These are people who cared for our community by tending to the needs of the sick, by showing compassion to each person who came through the doors of the emergency department, by carefully cleaning rooms, by offering a warm greeting and a sincere "how are you" to their colleagues, by listening empathically to patients and their families, and by honoring the dignity and worth of each person in their care. Today, as we remember and honor these beloved staff members, may we find comfort in the memories we hold close, and may we deepen our commitment to the care and compassion that guided their lives.
This is a poem, really kind of a blessing, almost a liturgy by Kate Bowler. The calendar tells me a big day is coming, and this is the first one in a new reality. I don't know how to get through with it. I don't know what to do with it, the memories, the traditions, the pain, and the excruciating beauty of all that was. Blessed are we who come in the midst of grief and loss, fear and longing, irritability and anger, gratitude and sweet remembrance, and so much exhaustion. Blessed are we who say, I don't know where home is now or who I am now. Couldn't I just rest for a while? I'm too tired to feel everything there is to feel, too exhausted to face the truth. Grant me solitude enough for solace and company enough for comfort. People to be with who know how to slip quietly under the weight of this grief and shoulder it with me without much to say. Blessed are we who ask for permission to do things the same way or completely differently, to wade through raw emotions or ride on the surface of it all. Give us wisdom and guidance that transcends the strangeness, making whatever little plans are possible. Blessed are we who ask for a way forward during this time, to celebrate some small ritual of remembrance that becomes a safe place to store the love and the grief, the anger and the ache of the knowledge that there is no one who can take their place, no one. Blessed are we who remember, amidst all the cheer and joy, that we do not need to move on or let go. The love we carry for the ones we've lost will always be a part of us.
In the blessing that Jesse read, we were encouraged to be a part of a small ritual of remembrance that might become a safe place to hold our love and our grief. So I invite all of us now to participate in a ritual to honor those who have died, whether a beloved family member, a dear colleague, or a patient in your care. Maybe this person died in the last year, or perhaps it's an older grief that you felt in new ways this year. Our hope is that the ritual will offer a moment of support and comfort in your grief, but you're of course welcome to not participate or simply take a break if something about this doesn't feel supportive. If you are joining us at home, I do invite you to take this moment to pause and find a candle. Once you find your candle, you can start the program again and join in the ritual. If you don't have a candle nearby, you might choose to temporarily light a match or simply envision a candle in your mind. Before we light our candles, first hold it in your hands. As you notice its shape and color, you might want to say the name of the people or person aloud. As you hold that person or those people in your hearts, I invite you to light your candle. Notice the flicker of the flame and allow it to illuminate a special memory with this person or something you cherished about them. It could be one particular moment with them. Or it could be the way they gave hugs. Or maybe it's a value or a lesson that they've passed on to you. As you feel the warmth and the presence of the candle, allow yourself to hold this and notice the feelings that may accompany it: sadness, gratitude, regret, guilt, joy, longing, whatever it may be. As we grieve, we know that it is common to feel many emotions, sometimes even those that feel conflicting, all at once. Finally, I invite you to notice the candles on this table. Each candle on the table represents someone who has been a part of one of our grief support groups at the hospital this year. We know that each candle on this table holds a particular, unique story, just as your grief is specific to you. At the same time, the glow of these candles reminds us that there are others who understand the deep pain of loss. For those who are gathered in the room, you are welcome now to come add your candle to this table. As we move into this winter season, especially in moments when our grief feels lonely and isolating, may the image of these candles rekindle in us the knowledge and the comfort that we do not grieve alone.
Some years ago in 2021, I did an interview with the news program, and it was called Share the Love. And we did a whole interview, and the end result of that, they asked the final question. And they basically asked, and this was right around 2021, around COVID time, and they asked, what can the public do to help? Help the nurses who were taking care of COVID patients, who were going through, coming into the hospital and taking care. And of course, we gave hospital answers, wash your hands, wear your mask, 6 feet apart. But as I was driving home, I was thinking about really the answer to that question and what it is that I needed the public to know or to do. We got plenty of pizzas during that time, but then there were things really to answer that question. And so I sat down and thought about some stuff, and I wrote this sometime around 2021 during the time that I was working on the COVID unit here at WakeMed. And I entitled this, The Life of a COVID Nurse. Know that we are your counselors. We were your sounding board for your wants. We were the receptacles for your fear, for your anger and your worry. We took your anxiety and carried it with us. We celebrated your victories. We mourned your setbacks as though they were our own. We smiled with you. We cried out of sight from you. We hurt. We hugged. We helped. And we tried to heal. Imagine this. How many times have you laughed and then cried with a coworker, then walked out and advised and then intubated a deathly ill patient, then informed and grieved with a family that you don't know, but yet you do it with the sincerity as if you've known them forever? Can you imagine doing this? Can you imagine what that's like to do it in a 12-hour period? Now take that time and imagine, could you do this 3 times a week, for a month, for 3 months, for 18 months. That is the life of a COVID nurse. The public kept saying that we as nurses were on the front line, but I sincerely reject that, because we were branded, our souls were branded by those who were fighting for their lives. Our psyches were tattooed by the words of people who said to us, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to pass." The front lines, I think that is a trivial statement. Honestly, I think that's where people caught the virus, because where I worked, we worked in the heavens. Psalms 8 says that God made man slightly lower than the angels. And we did our part, escorting souls to the altar. As COVID nurses, we gave comfort during the dying. We offered peace to those saddled with guilt. We felt the weight of their humanity, because oftentimes we were the last faces seen and the last voices heard before they stood before God. As a COVID nurse, we were sacrificial in our efforts that we gave. We were perpetual in the hope that we carried, and we were resilient in the character that we displayed. You see, these hard times educated us to what our true purpose was. Forget salaries, forget how long we've been here, but it is the servitude that became our purpose that we realized in those hardened times. These adjectives that I described here describe a period of time, but for me, those things have changed. Those adjectives have become the foundation for my nursing and for what it means to take care of the sick and hurting. Thank you.
My name is Adam Kepner. I'm one of the palliative care physicians here. Palliative care's role in the hospital is often meeting people in the middle of a crisis. Commonly when someone has a life-threatening problem, and commonly when we've reached a point when we've realized that those problems are no longer fixable. And often when someone's nearing the end of life. And we try to walk with people in the middle of that crisis to try to help them navigate the next steps in a way that feels right to them. And often we're part of caring for people in their final moments of life here in the hospital. Caring for patients who are suffering and dying, caring for your family member who's dying is never easy, and it's always heartbreaking. And there are no words that I can say to anyone to make that not heartbreaking. And any attempt to do so, I think, runs the risk of being inauthentic, of not listening to people and not acknowledging the depths of their sorrow. What I can do sometimes is to try to find beauty in the midst of sorrow, to find that sometimes beauty can coexist with the sadness that comes when someone we love dies. This past year, I took care of an elderly woman who was in the hospital with kidney failure. I saw her and her family, her son in particular, many times over a span of several weeks. Tests and treatments were done, and eventually it became clear that she was dying, that nothing more could be done to save her life. During our conversations, she had been very clear that she wanted that process to be as peaceful and as natural as it could be. And it's incredibly hard to talk about these things. Sometimes harder to talk about those things with your family. She did, and her body was telling us that it was her time. And I remember the last time that I saw her. I walked into her room. Her son was there, someone with whom I had become close. She was lying on her bed. Her eyes were closed. She was incredibly weak. She couldn't barely lift her head off the pillow. This was her deathbed. And she ended up dying there several hours later. When I walked in, she was delirious, not fully in her right mind, which is quite normal at that point. I sat down next to her, and she opened her eyes. She took a moment, gathered herself, and then she looked right at me, and she smiled. And she was too weak to talk, but her smile had this peace to it and this depth of recognition, of understanding, of acceptance. Peace that she was not suffering anymore. Peace that she knew what was happening and was ready for it. And hope that her faith gave her for what was next after this life. And I was so moved that her son and I both began to stand there and tear up. This past year, I've been reading a book called A Grace Disguised by Jerry Sitzer, professor of theology, and it's a memoir about a car accident that happened years prior, during which his wife, his mother, and his young daughter were all killed. One of the themes of the book is learning to live with the tension of coexisting opposite feelings. So acknowledging the pain and seeing the beauty. Owning the terribleness and learning how to grow from it. Not in a Pollyanna way that dismisses the grief we experience with loss, but in an authentic, open-eyed way that brings that grief right out into the open. And also puts those moments of simple yet profound goodness right alongside the grief. And this strikes me as a genuine description of what we try to do in the hospital. So with my patient, the difficulty of her death for the family, right along with the peace that she was not suffering. The grief that comes naturally when you lose someone you love, along with the reassurance that she was ready for it and had come to terms with it. And for me, after that experience, I will never forget both the sadness we all felt and the profound beauty of her final smile.
As a chaplain resident, I have the privilege of journeying with patients, families, and staff through the process of death and dying, through grief and loss. Outside of the hospital, I'm pursuing a Doctor of Ministry degree, and my research focus is grief. I've come to understand that death is the great equalizer. Death is one thing that all humans have to experience. But for those who are living after loss, it can be a disorientingly painful experience. But grief can teach a lot. So today I want to share a few lessons that I've learned from my own grief and from bearing witness to the grief of others. Now, these aren't rules or things to follow, but these are just some things that I've learned while I've been navigating the choppy waters of grief work. So 7 lessons from grief. Grief is an embodied experience. Your entire body, all of your senses, your soul experiences grief. Food tastes different. Songs touch your ear in a different way. Clothes kiss your skin differently than they did before. Thinking your way through grief is not sustainable. Eventually, you will have to feel your way through. When you're supporting someone grieving, it's okay to be quiet. There are times when words will not be helpful, but your presence will. Loss hurts, and acknowledging that pain is okay. Love is risky, but it's worth it. Grief can be complicated, and that's okay too. Try not to should your way through, because each encounter with grief is different. There is no right way to respond. Those are just 7 lessons that I've learned. But I know that they won't be the only lessons I learn. Because once you've had an encounter with grief, the lessons don't stop.
I would like to invite you here, and if you're watching, I'd like for you to join us as well in a closing tribute. You can turn on the back of your program here. If you're at home, I hope you have it as well. And you will be reading the bolded part. So please join me. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick of heart, we remember them. When we have joys and special celebrations we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are a part of us. We remember them.